Welcome to Snowmobile Sessions Live on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms. It's the #1 destination to learn about snowmobiling, network with other sledders, and have an awesome time doing it. We'll meet other snowmobilers that share your passion and show your fan photos along the way. Snowmobile Sessions Live. Enjoy the ride.
This episode of Snowmobile Sessions Live is brought to you by Energy Power Sports. They're Oakville's full-line BRP dealer with sales and service to all BRP models and so much more. Energy Power Sports always has the fun in store with a wide selection of clothing, parts, and accessories for all your power sports passions. Make Energy Power Sports your source for Can-Am off-road, ATV, and side-by-sides. Can-Am on-road Ryker and Spider, including the sporty F3S. Sea-Doo watercraft and Switch pontoon boats. And Alumacraft fishing boats powered by Mercury Marine. Put yourself on a Manitou pontoon or a Widescape stand-up snowmobile. Energy Power Sports is the home for Lynx and Ski-Doo snowmobiles for the entire family. Do you feel the energy? Energy Power Sports, 879 Cranberry Court, Oakville, Ontario, or online, energypowersports.ca. This episode of Snowmobile Sessions Live is brought to you by... What are we doing here? Good evening, everybody, everyone in the chat tonight. And we're here with Spencer D, and he has a really good podcast out there, and it's called the Carbide Podcast. How you doing, Spencer?
I'm doing fantastic, Gary. How about yourself?
Excellent. Yeah, we talked about saying your last name, and I didn't want to butcher it. And Spencer, for everyone watching, got a real kick out of my UP name versus Siri contest we had last year or the year before. And yeah, so I said, I'm not even going to try your name. And away we go.
No, it's all good. When I got married, I told my wife she didn't have to take my last name, and she did. So I said, hey, man, it's your funeral.
That's great. What was her maiden name, though? Was it something simple like Smith?
Oh yeah, her maiden name was Finney. Way easier. So
you should have took her name, possibly.
I know. I considered it, but I thought my last name was kind of cool, even though nobody can say it. So I'm running with it.
Oh yeah, for sure. So what is this, the Carbide Podcast?
Yeah, so I started the Carbide Podcast June or July of this year, and kind of the goal was to document some of the untold stories and the history around snowmobile, like just the industry and racers. You know, I consume a lot of media in motocross and NASCAR and IndyCar and stuff like that. And there's a lot of media outlets that kind of delve into the history of some of those sports and some of the lesser known names, but there's not a ton of it in snowmobile racing, particularly like late 90s, early 2000s guys in snowcross and ovals and stuff like that. So just kind of started to kind of document some history, and it's become pretty big, got some pretty big names, and it's got a big following. So it's been fun.
Yeah, that's good. And that's how I got introduced to you is Corey actually sent me the link to the Tucker Hibbert podcast. And I thought it was Tucker's. I reached out to you and you said, it's actually not Tucker, but that was a good show. But I did listen to it and it was really good. And I've listened to a few now. And if you're looking for something almost as good as Snowmobile Sessions, you got to check out the Carbide Podcast. It's a little different spin on it. He's very professional. I think you keep them all contained into a fairly shorter program than what I run. And but like I said, Tucker Hibbert's on there, and kudos to you that. And after I listened to that, I went, you know what? I probably couldn't even do that interview with that guy any justice. That was so well done.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been wild. I mean, we got Tucker on there recently. We did one with Blair Morgan earlier this year. Some pretty high profile names have been on there, Danny Poirier, and you know, there's been a couple of them where like I'm definitely super nervous at first. Like the first couple questions, I'm super timid and I'm nervous, and then because you know a lot of these guys are my heroes in a lot of ways. So but yeah, we're getting better, but it's been fun. I think a lot of the I get a lot of racers from the early 2000s that message me, that listen. And even that's really cool. Like guys that I looked up to that listen to the pod. That's probably the coolest part.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. We had Blair on years ago, and I run into him at trade shows all the time. And the sad thing is, I don't think the younger generation know who he is. Like you'll go to a show and Nerona's got people bugging him left and right, and Blair is just wheeling around doing his own thing. It's like it's no problem. He might have one or two people here and there. It's like this guy is the legend of snowcross.
Yep.
What are you guys doing? You want to smack some people and go, hey, get over there and talk to this guy.
Yeah. It's funny. I compare it a lot to, like I said, I listen to a lot of motocross stuff as well. And, there's a lot of people try and bring up Jeremy McGrath, Ricky Carmichael, a lot of guys from that era, Chad Reed. And there's a whole group of guys that are now pro that grew up and never even saw Ricky Carmichael ride a dirt bike. So you ask them who their hero was growing up. It's like, oh, it was Filippoto or Dungey. I never even saw Ricky, and I definitely never saw McGrath and stuff like that. And Blair's right in that category. Like there's now a whole group of people who never even saw him ride once. So it's cool though to like kind of share some of those stories, and a lot of videos now resurface of him battling with guys. And I think a new level of respect is coming from a lot of younger people because of that stuff. But yeah, we got a long way to go, I think, for sure.
Oh yeah. And it's nice to have guys like you and I out there telling the stories of these guys. Right. And with your motocross, you'll get a kick out of this. I was invited to the Can-Am 50th event, and you'll see the videos on my channel that, it just been happenstance that I got to interview some of the original Can-Am guys, like the number 2, 3, 4 hires when the Can-Am project started. These guys are like absolute legends. Like they were involved in the design and engineering of the complete bike. I mean, they had a motor and they put something around it, and you get like 100 views.
Oh yeah.
It's like,
really?
7-time champion in the 70s. And you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah. No, I post a lot of reels on Instagram and about, old stuff. And I did this one edit with, it was the Scorpion Squadron. So it was, Steve Thorson, Brad Hewling's factory Scorpion in the late 70s. It gets like 6 views, but you post something from like 5 years ago, that's like, modern days. Oh, it kills it. Everybody loves it. All these comments like, that OG vintage one, that one's pretty damn cool. But you take what you can get.
Yeah. Oh, I know for sure. So what is your background? Like, how did you get into, like, what's your background? How did you get into podcasting, the world of snowmobiling?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Northern Vermont, hence my French last name, heavily influenced by your friends to the east. Yep. So, a lot of snowmobiling up there, very small town, about 5,000 people. So everybody rode ATVs and snowmobiles and stuff like that. So, rode most of my childhood, raced snowcross as a teen, and then moved out to Minnesota when I was in college, still racing and stuff like that. So, love snowmobiles. It's definitely my biggest passion in life. But when I was in college, I actually studied history. So always have a love for the past and documenting things, because I think that's really important. So kind of kicked it around in my head for a few years. Like, I don't know, nobody's really doing it like they do in these other sports. Nobody's really documenting some of this history and stuff like that. So finally just bit the bullet this year and said, you know what? I'm not super articulate. I'm not the best behind a mic, but I got to put my money where my mouth is. So I decided to jump in head first with the pod. And yeah, it's been fun so far. Just not only talking to these old racers who I've looked up to and getting the stories, but also kind of digging up some of the stories nobody's heard before. Like, I did an episode recently with Kent Harley, who was the CEO of Redline. So a lot of the story behind the revolt and kind of where his thought process was, of where it came from and all this kind of stuff. Like a lot of these things that people haven't heard, and everybody cares. Everybody's interested. It's just not a lot of people go the extra mile to document it. So yeah, it's been fun.
Oh, well, that's cool. How many shows have you done?
I think I'm 22 or so. I started in, like I said, June or July, and I've posted one every week for the most part. There's been a couple off weeks, but since then I posted one every week.
Yeah, and you're not live though, so you pretty much have the ability to crank them out when you can. And
Yeah, you try, but as we chatted about, the struggle. Like everybody's down to do an episode until you try and pick a date, and then you can't get in touch with them. So
yeah, I live that. I totally live that. The Revolt thing's very interesting because that's kind of the rumor is that's where Rev kind of got the idea. The Skidoo Rev kind of was built off of that that same type of philosophy, right?
Yeah, it's funny because that, we talked about earlier, some of people not even being around for Blair. Like there's, again, like when I posted that, there was a handful of people my age that remember that sled growing up, but it was a lot of older guys that were like, oh man, when that thing came out, like salivating, like everybody wanted one. So that's a pretty unique piece of kit. I know there's one in the Hall of Fame, which is really, really cool. I would love to see him make another. I mean, he left a little nugget in my show that he's not done making snowmobiles. So we'll see. We'll see if he makes a comeback.
That's very cool. Yeah. Well, another guys I've been talking to is Snowhawk as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they're on their way back, which was Snowhawk was a pretty cool snowmobile kind of combination thing. So I just wanted to address something here because I went to watch my show. So this is a little PSA on my part. So just excuse me for a second. And I went to watch my show last week and I was like, where the heck did the live chat go? And if you look at your YouTube, if you're watching this on playback, you'll see that there's comments here on all my live streams. And you'll see there's 2 dots over on the right. And basically what you want to do is just tap your finger onto the, darn it. You tap your finger onto the chat window and swipe to the one side. An ad came up. You swipe to the one side and it'll actually reveal the live chat. So it was like, I was starting to panic because I was going like, I love seeing the live chat after the fact, and it was gone. So if you're wondering where it went, just open up the comments and slide it over on your mobile, and then the live chat will pop up and you can see it. So right now in the chat, we got Anthony Palermo is back. Corey Brock's always in the house. Greg Kelly, hey, how you doing? LaPointe, Ski 800R, and Greg Kelly says he hasn't watched the Carbide, but he's going to probably start. P63060, Rob the Oil Guy's in the house. Just fly low. Massert's there, of course. He's one hell of a podcaster master. They must be talking about me, not you. I don't know. No, you do a really good job. And Nathan M, correct. He says that, and away we go. So yeah, the chat's firing up. We got about 40 people in the house right now, and it's getting. I think the Truss and Boschkung teamed up. Correct. I thought the same thing. That must be for the Skidoo Rev. I love the live session. Good job. Yeah, live is a different animal. It's no different than what you go through every week, Spencer. I know. So we just talked about that live.
Sorry, go ahead.
Live's a little tougher when you don't press record like what I did last week.
Yeah, that's one thing I don't have to deal with as much. The live stuff it's scary to me. I'm happy to be in my little cove where nobody can see me usually and recording episodes, but I was happy to jump on here because this is a cool audience. It's a cool program you put together, very different from mine, but you get a ton of engagement, ton of good comments. So I was happy to join on.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, what do you think about like you do racers and you do obviously, if you're talking about Revolt and things like that, or Redline, sorry. What do you find most interesting for you as far as content goes?
It's probably a toss-up. I have a pretty big racing background, so I'm very passionate about that. So I love those stories, but just the historian in me, plus I work in the power sports industry, so I enjoy some of the topics related to, dealer insights or original builds of machines and OEMs and stuff like that. So I've done some episodes with some guys from aftermarket brands. I did one with Chad from EPI, one with Dustin from Climb. Like just hearing those guys' strategy, like how they're competing versus OEMs versus e-com, brick and mortar, all this kind of stuff. So I enjoy that stuff a lot. I know my listener base might not like that stuff as much. They like the racing stuff, but I just think there's a lot to be learned and a lot to be gained when you can understand the industry from both sides. If you're on the consumer side, you understand, yeah, I want this product. This product's cool. But you also understand that, you know, my brick and mortar dealer, my Energy Power Sports, I should go there because those guys are the backbone of the power sports industry. If those guys go away, it's going to be tough getting sleds. Those guys have the inventory, they have the knowledge, go there. So I like to try and spread out the knowledge of all these different areas of snowmobiling as much as I can.
Oh yeah, that's good. Where did you get the name? Keith wants to know, where did you get the name Carbides? The Carbide podcast. How'd that come up with?
I don't know. I was just trying to think of something that, at least if you were a snowmobiler, there was something that you would look at that and say, yep, that's a snowmobile thing. I don't know anything about the guy. I don't know what he's doing, but Carbide, that's got to be a snowmobile thing. So I just kind of ran with it. If anybody wants to steal this one, a close second was going to be the twin piped modcast. And I feel like that would have been really cool. So if anybody wants to take that, just give me credit. But yeah,
nobody gives you credit in this world. Yeah, for sure. So you said you grew up in Maine. Where do you live now?
I grew up in Vermont. It's all the same. New England. It's all the same.
It is.
But yeah, I live in Minneapolis now. Just north of Minneapolis in Minnesota.
So do you trail ride? So I just had to shut the dehumidifier off there. Do you actually trail ride, or do you still get out and race much? Do you mountain ride?
I ride as much as I can. It's really trail riding locally here in Minneapolis. I haven't been on a snowcross track in a number of years. I hung up the boots when I graduated college. I said it's time to be an adult and get a day job. But yeah, I ride trails when I can. And then I've gotten into the vintage scene a little bit the last couple years. So my Scorpion probably gets more yard miles than my trail sled. But you know, I don't know what you got up there right now, Gary, but it is bleak here in Minneapolis right now. There is zero snow, and it is 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 degrees Fahrenheit. It is not looking too hot right now.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's we have no snow here, but you go 3 hours, 4 hours north, and it's getting really close to having some trails open. I seen Corey commenting about the Halliburton Forest. There's no lake crossings or anything like that, and they groom, and they even made snow in the past to ride on, and they must be getting close to opening, because I've seen pictures from some of the we got one to show tonight, but I've seen pictures of some of the fans on Fan Photo, and they're actually getting really deep up there, and the lakes are starting to freeze, and that's the key. Because if we don't have those lakes freezing like last year, you could be late start. We had all kinds of snow, no lakes, swamps were slush like mud. So it was it was potent to go out, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's there was supposed to be, obviously it's land of 10,000 lakes here in Minnesota. So a lot of lakes to freeze, but there was supposed to be a cross country race opener next weekend, I believe, up on Pine Lake, and they had to push that out because, you know, we had a couple weeks where it was super cold and the ice thickened up, but now it's super warm, so there's just too much risk and all this kind of stuff. So a lot of races are getting pushed out right now, so it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Do you have any local to you like this? Does Snowcross come to your hometown, or is it fairly close?
There's a couple in the greater Minneapolis area. Probably the biggest of the year is usually the second race of the year, which is at Canterbury Park in Shakopee. Really big horse race track, massive grandstands. Definitely the biggest race of the year. And then ERX Motor Park over in Elk River usually hosts one or two nationals depending on the year. So there's quite a few. Plus there's regional rounds, but there's quite a few snowcross and snowmobile races in the Minneapolis area. But, you know, then obviously they spread out because they're national circuits. So, but yeah, try and get out to one or two a year. It's It's been busy lately, but we're gonna give it a shot.
Awesome. Outdoor hobby guy in Quebec says his lakes are about 1 hour away from being frozen. And someone said they are 2 hours northwest of Spencer and got a light dusting today. It's coming.
Yeah, it was weird. I probably got the same thing because I woke up this morning. I work about 40 minutes south of my house. So I woke up this morning, left my house. It was about 35 degrees, no snow. Pulling into my office, which is just like a west suburb of Minneapolis, there was snow hitting the ground and it just messes with my head. So we'll see. We'll see if we get anything.
That's very cool. And you had some good news, some exciting news this week as far as a sponsor come on board. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. Woody's Traction stepped up as the title sponsor. So we are now the Carbide podcast presented by Woody's Traction. And, a lot of people had been bugging me, like wondering when a sponsor is going to come on board. And I wasn't super aggressive with it just because, I like the freedom to do my own show. And at the same time, racing for a number of years, I didn't want to just slap a name on a program of somebody I didn't trust. So, I reached out to a couple brands that I use when racing and Woody stepped up big. They were on it right away. And that was super cool. So, super stoked to be partnered with Woody's for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. You made it when you get a couple of sponsors come on board, and I can't thank Energy Power Sports enough and Fast Track snowmobile traction products. So yeah, it's a good thing. It kind of cements the fact that what you're doing is for the betterment of the snowmobiling community for sure.
Absolutely.
Do you have any favorite snowmobile rides or memories?
Of all time, of my whole life?
Yeah.
Well, like I said, grew up in Vermont, and if there's any like New England riders that listen, you might know the ride. But growing up, there's a restaurant. It's called the Abbey. I forget the city it's in. I always forget because I rode there a lot when I was a kid. But it's in about central Vermont, and probably for 4 or 5 miles leading up to the Abbey is an old railroad bed. So just a straightaway as a railroad bed. And I remember like that was where I hit 100 miles an hour for the first time in my life. And I was probably like 10 years old on a snowmobile. And that, so that railroad and, hit 100 miles an hour, you stop at the Abbey, grab lunch or whatever, and then you beeline home. But the trails in New England always have a special place in my heart, obviously riding in Vermont and then getting over to Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, and you get up into Maine and stuff like that. So, the trails in Minnesota and Wisconsin are great, but I will put New England trails up against anybody in the world any day.
Yeah. You want to know how great my chat is, my fans, the people watching? Mm-hmm. Keith says Chazy, New York. And he says he's 30, he said 30 miles from the Abbey. Isn't that amazing?
That's you love it. Small world. You love to see it.
I know. Yeah, love that area. Yeah. So that's very, very cool. No. So do you have a family? Are you married or what do you do in your off time?
Yeah, I got married last summer. My wife and I had been together for 6 or 7 years or so prior to that. So, I bought a house last summer and then just been, doing the adult thing for a little while. So it's, between, my wife went to grad school, so we were very busy there. And then now we're both working. And then I got the podcast at night as much as I can, and no kids yet. But, when I have a kid, I'm sure the podcast will have to take a back seat for a hot second. But, right now, just busy, man. Just busy with this and hobbies and working. So,
well, you don't have to worry about your kid taking over your bandwidth on your internet. That's what I was dealing with. Like when my son was home, he's in university now, but when he'll be home soon. It's like you can tell when he starts gaming because things just start getting a little bit foggy on the screen.
So. Oh yeah. I'm looking forward to being a parent at some point, but there's a lot of aspects that I'm milking as much as I can right now, and bandwidth is definitely one of them.
Yeah. A couple questions out there about Heydays. Did you make it to Heydays?
I did make it to Heydays this year. I usually go every year. Heydays is about 25 minutes just north of my house. So always try and make
Oh,
it out there at
wow.
least, yeah, at least on Saturday for sure. The last couple years I was able to walk the entire swap, which was great. It was like 10 miles, but I walked it. This year I got caught up just, like any trade show, you run into friends that you haven't seen in a year that you will never see there. And then you just, before you know it, it's like 4:30 in the afternoon and you're like, all right, I don't have time for the swap. But yeah, always a good show. And if you're a snowmobile enthusiast and you haven't been to Heydays yet, it's got to be done. You have to make it.
Yeah. Chip Massart wants to know if he can stay by you guys. It sounds like he was further away than that.
Yeah, it's
Maybe he's got a room in his basement for us next year. He's going to host the Heydays crew.
The best part about it is, like, obviously it's, the entire snowmobile world kind of descends on the small city of North Branch for that one weekend. And North Branch is a very, very small city. So you have, a ton of people from all around the world coming to Heydays, and they basically just fan out in all the hotels are in the area. And some people end up like still 45 minutes away from the location. So it's classic small town snowmobiler stuff. It's great.
Yeah, I heard it was awesome though. The crew that we had there had a blast. So it's definitely on the horizon. Hopefully next year we'll get out there and see it, because I think from what you and I do week to week, I think it's a very valuable experience to set up. And my whole thing was to make sure that we locked down Levi, because he said he was going to come on episode 108, and we're getting pretty close.
Yeah,
I think I'm at 90. I think I'm at 96, I think, right now. I'm going to have to count it up, because I told him I'd give him a schedule when I think he's going to be on, but it'll be close to the end of the season, if not the season finale, that we get that guy on.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome. I managed to get an interview with him episode, I don't know, 12, 13, something like that. I did one with Levi, and yeah, just everything that you like think he would be, he is. Just like the nicest guy, super comical, super casual, approachable. Like he's like I said on my episode with him, just like there's no better ambassador for snowmobiling than Levi LaValle, no doubt.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's and that's one, like we were talking about, people not knowing the OGs or who the real OGs are. That guy's been around long enough to actually, serve the older generation like myself as well as the new younger generation, right? He's at his hands and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was he brought it up at the end of my episode, but it was funny because we talked a lot about his racing career on there, just because it's, I do a racing podcast, and he's like, I appreciate you bringing up all the racing, because most people just think of me as like the stunt guy or the distance jump guy. Like some people don't even know that I raced at all. So
yeah, isn't that crazy?
It's funny. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's wild.
That's insane. Very insane. So you said you work in the snowmobile industry. What kind of things do you do?
So I work in power sports. My day job's actually with Indian Motorcycle. So
nice.
I've worked a handful of roles in power sports. I worked for some dealerships, some aftermarket brands. I worked for CF Moto for a while. Worked for an oil company that makes a lot of snowmobile oil, and then now I'm with Indian. So
nice.
I love power sports. That's why I moved out to Minnesota in the first place from Vermont, was to chase a dream in power sports. And if you want to work in power sports, you got to be in Minneapolis or you got to be in Minnesota. So, living the dream in a lot of ways, but that's kind of, like I mentioned earlier, that's kind of what piques my interest in some of these other aspects in these other interviews, because I deal with it on a daily basis. Like, well, why did the dealer not buy your product? Like, what was his pushback? What was your strategy of getting into dealers? What was your financing? Stuff like this that most people don't care. I just deal with it on a daily basis. So I'm very, very interested to learn from other people and see how they handle it. So
very cool. Well, that's the thing. Do you ride bikes in the summertime?
Yeah. As much as I can. I just, I'm pretty busy in the summertime. My main hobby is actually bicycles in the summertime. So if I'm not on the road bike or the mountain bike, I try and get out on a motorcycle and twist the throttle. But yeah, just time, man. Like we all have too many damn hobbies. There's just not enough time.
Oh, we do, definitely. That's the thing. It's like, you know, we're thinking about moving, and it's like, well, where am I going to put all my crap?
Yep.
You know, yeah, I just want to buy a shop and then a really, really tiny house, maybe with a bedroom and a bathroom.
Right. That's all you need. That's all you need.
It's totally true. It totally is. Greg Kelly says, just fly low rides a victory.
Oh,
he
yeah.
rides a victory cycle, which is your competition, Polaris, right?
Well, so we Polaris founded or launched Victory. I'm sure the gentleman in the chat knows that. But yeah, Victory used to be the old motorcycle brand, and then when Polaris acquired Indian, the brand of Indian, they ran them both for a year or two, and then transitioned all the efforts into Indian. So I can tell you right now that anytime I go to work in the summertime, at least, and there's all bikes lined up in the front of guys that rode into work, maybe 40% of them are victories, because the guys that have their victories love their victories.
Very cool. Yeah, it's a nice classic looking bike, but you've got the modern amenities and conveniences on it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what snowmobile do you ride?
There's 4 sleds in the garage at the moment. So my regular trail sled, I have a Arctic Crossfire, and then don't tell, you know, I work for Indian. I don't have, I'm allowed to ride other brands, but yeah, I have Arctic Crossfire. My wife has a F8, and then I just picked up over the summer Crisp. It's got 2,200 original miles and 01 SRX 700. Super stoked on it.
Sweet.
Love the triples. And then my vintage sled, I have a 77 Scorpion Sting, and that thing probably gets more miles than anything else in my garage.
Right on. There's gonna be lots of love in the chats for you, man. All Train Free TV's probably drooling right now. And Massart, he's got a collection growing like yours. And LaPointe's nailed it. He said it sounds like your wife supports your hobby.
You know, I'm lucky enough that when we met, she knew what she was getting into. So yeah, she's very, very supportive for sure.
That's awesome. Well, that's the thing. That's a great sled she runs too. Those F8s are nothing to balk about, man. That's a rocket she's on.
Oh yeah, and it was funny. So one of my earlier episodes, I did one with Joey Hallstrom, and he was the product manager at Arctic during the time of the Twin Spar chassis. So we talked about like what a quote unquote commercial failure the Twin Spar was, because people didn't like how it looked and everything like that. But you ride those, there's no more, like there's never been a more comfortable sled than a Twin Spar Cat. It's like riding a couch. They're super comfortable. They're warm. They're a rocket ship. Yeah, she's got a pretty sweet sled. I'm a little jealous that that's what she ended up with, but that's okay.
I think timing was bad on that, because they come out with the Crossfire and the F series, and then Skidoo launched the Rev, and it just, all the attention went away, right? And like I rode with them, they're dynamite machines and ride nice, but you're sitting back. It's not cab forward. It was just bad timing, I think, in that case. But I'm glad to see Cat coming back, though. They're clawing themselves back into the industry, and it'll be interesting to see what happens now. Yamaha's out of the picture, if they can get closer to, you know, Polaris's market share, or where they'll end up in a few years, because what they're doing now looks like they're doing everything right.
Yeah, I would agree. And, you know, you can call me biased because my paycheck has Polaris on it, but I think anybody who really loves the industry is humble enough to know that we need Arctic. Like we need them around. So I want the Catalyst chassis to succeed just as much as anybody does. I would love to see them get back to their former glory. Maybe not outsell Polaris. We got to, you know, measure our expectations, of course, but I would love to see them, you know, make a return to prominence. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think Polaris is a pretty solid seat in the house. They've got accessories now. clothing with the Climb, family, being in there and things like that. And I mean, BRP has a complete package, right? So as long as you can offer all that, you're pretty much cemented in the industry. But cat ended up being so way off the radar that I think now it's starting to come back. One thing they did have back in the day was if you talk to any cat consumer, they're more loyal than anybody. I mean, even still today, like my friend Moose with the Altiger, you'd have to pull a cat out of his cold dead hands before he'd see himself on anything else.
Oh yeah, and yeah, you look at the longtime loyalists. I mean, the one guy that sticks out to me, just being on the racing side. So Zach Herfindahl, probably the greatest cross country racer, arguably in history, has always been on cat. He's always going to be on cat because his family is a cat family. Like you just don't see that in the other brands. That kind of heritage, that kind of loyalty that you see with Arctic Cats. So, yeah, I think they're in for a good run. People are getting their catalysts right now, and people are really liking them. So I'm hoping they're in for some good fortune for sure.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. When you say that, it's you look at. I think you have to judge everything before COVID, right? Because there is skidoo guys like myself. I had a Polaris come home once, and I opened the hood, and it was so foreign to me, right? But there is guys like that, and the same with Polaris. They'll only ride Polaris because that's what they know. They can work on them. They know what goes where and what oil to run and all kinds of things like that. Where I think when COVID hit, people just bought whatever they wanted, right? And there isn't that brand, that commitment to the brand like there used to be. Do you agree with that statement somewhat?
I would agree. And I think some of it comes from obviously supply chain limitations of what you can get at the time. And I think a lot of it too is just people can't afford some of these sleds these days. Like when it comes down to it, I mean, you want to buy a new to you or a brand new sled and you got a budget. I mean, I don't know about you, Gary. I don't have 20 grand burning a hole in my pocket to go buy a new sled. So I got a budget. And when the time comes, I got to look at what's in my budget, and hopefully it's on a color I like, but ultimately I want to get out and ride. And I think as long as people are out riding, that's really all that truly matters at the end of the day. Like we can pull them back and forth between brands and stuff like that in the big picture, but ultimately we just want, butts in seats at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's the truth, right? As long as you're on the snow and you're having a good time doing it, that's the
Exactly.
key. What is your feelings on technology? Are you a tech guy when it comes to snowmobiling?
I think it's cool. I find it really interesting and very impressive, but I'm very much more of an old school guy. Like, I think just the modern day displays and telemetry and all that's really, really cool and stuff like that. But if I can't fix my own sled in my garage, if I can't buy the parts at the dealer and go fix it myself, I'm a little less inclined to go that route. But there's a lot of people that love that stuff. And I think there's areas like, electronic suspension where you can toggle it on the handlebars or it adjusts on its own. That stuff's really, really cool. It's cool when it works. And when it doesn't work, you cannot figure it out for the life of you. It's just like a car, if you
Yeah.
used to be able to open up the hood and see down to the ground. Now you don't even know what you're looking at anymore. So I think it's cool. I definitely miss the simplicity of it all for sure.
Yeah, yeah. The all-terrain TV. The John Deere guys can't be hanging around with the Massey Ferguson guys. Come on. No, and I love the tech. Like I have smart shocks on my sled and they are worth every penny. And I like the gauge. Like I like the big 10.25-inch gauge. Caveat with some with an asterisk is you're right. Like I don't know in 10 years where they'll be. Like as far as you've got an F8 in your garage. Are we going to see that same sled? Like, will there be a 2024 XRS in someone's garage in the year 2034?
Yeah, one of the things, and I'm a younger guy. I play a lot of video games. One of the things that worries a lot of gamers is, not having physical media. You need, patches and game support and stuff like that. If you have software on your sled in 20 years, if you have an issue, is that software going to exist? Is that software going to be supported by the OEM 20 years from now? At least on your O3 Pro X, you can figure it all out. It's all analog. It's all physically in front of you. So I like tech. It's interesting. It's cool. I can respect it. I'm just I'm I'm an old soul that way. I don't like the change, and wish I could go back to the way it used to be.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing. A lot of the people that are putting on the mileage, and it's the same for me too, is you can only go so long on an older sled. So if you get
Mhm.
into a plan where you're going to be flipping every few years, then you don't really have to worry too much about the tech. I'm worried about the tech for the guy after me, right?
Yep. Mhm.
And that's kind of thing, because I want to have access to that now and enjoy the ride kind of thing. While, you know, I've been there on the older sleds, and I do miss it where, it's when everything was so simple. I
Mhm.
strap my phone to the dash and away I go. As long as I had a nice set of headlights and snow on the trail, I was happy as a as a kid on Christmas morning.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The one that hit me hard and really made me just feel like a grumpy old man was my sled a couple years ago. Had just been sitting out in my in-laws cold garage. It hadn't been started in like a year. I was just storing it there, and I couldn't get it to start. So I was gonna try and do the old, put a little gas in the cylinder, pull out the spark plug, and try and get it to turn over there. Pulled off my panels, and you can't even get your hand, like you can't even do any of that. And I was like, back in the day, I would just lift up the hood. It was right there. It was easy to access. That stuff I miss. I don't miss, my back hurting from riding it, but I miss the accessibility for sure.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think about the electric entrance like Taiga and Skidoo coming out with the Grand Touring electrics?
I think it's really cool. I'm not quite sold on the application of EV technology in snow. I think, Taiga has their Orca, their PWC, and I think that is a prime use of electrification, no doubt. Like that, it works perfect in a watercraft setting, all this kind of stuff. I just think snow is going to be a while out for recreational use of that, just till the infrastructure gets there. I think if you have like a ski mountain or some kind of resort, or maybe just around the town rentals, those electric sleds will be perfect. They'll be super easy to understand. If you're new to snowmobiling, they're not going to make all your gear smell like gasoline. There's a lot of value to it. I just don't think the infrastructure is there yet for somebody to go out into the bush on their sled and just hope that they have enough charge to get home. So I I hope it really works out. I think the guys at Taiga have built an awesome sled. I think what they're doing is amazing. Same with BRP and their electric program. So I really hope it works, and I hope they're successful, because anybody that's saying that's not the future is lying. They're full of it. We're just kind of all waiting to see how it goes for somebody else before we all commit to to going down that path for sure.
Yeah, I think areas like the Halliburton Forest that I mentioned earlier, that's you buy your own permit to ride that forest system, or in Quebec, they have access to electric chargers along the way where you could have a route.
Hmm.
Here's your route, and the general consumer could go out and buy an electric sled and ride that route.
Hmm.
It's not going to be the guy that's trailering to the UP one weekend and Quebec the next weekend, and riding around Lake Superior or wherever, whatever they're doing.
Hmm.
They're not coming to lodge sessions. Well, maybe they will one day. Who knows? But yeah, yeah, I do think I'm excited about that. I'm excited to see where it's going to go, and with Skidoo being on board, I think it's going to really show if it's a make or break industry. The electrics out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we see it in the on-road space as well. Manufacturers making, I mean, even Can-Am's got their electric motorcycles as well, and I think we're all just kind of waiting to see, like I said earlier, just if it catches for anybody, because the technology is great. If you ride the machines, it's super fun, and if you can just get out of your own head that it doesn't make a sound and it doesn't have the feeling and yada yada. If you can get out of your own head, it's an amazing piece of kit. It's just how
Yeah.
long can I ride it and how much does it cost, at the end of the day. So I
Yeah.
think it's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. And Stark and Triumph come out with a dirt bike, but Stark has the electric, and
Hmm.
it's something else that is just adding to the whole industry. But I think in the summer, you're right. It's easier sell.
Hmm.
It's an easier sell to do it than in the wintertime when there was a comment already about the Tesla losing half its range in the wintertime. Um,
Hmm.
I'm not sure about that. I haven't really heard too much about that, but yeah, it's um, you never know, right? So,
Yeah.
someone said Trail 93 near Chappé is limited, should start lighting up in the next couple weeks. Are you actually like in the area where the trails are like December 1st to March, no matter what? Is that the way your trails work?
I don't know if they're that hard cut. Um, I think it might be like the 5th. Growing up in Vermont, that's pretty much what it was. Technically, it was open on the 5th. Uh, you were you were an ass if you rode on it and there was no snow. Like you were,
Yeah.
they didn't appreciate it, but you couldn't get in trouble. But yeah, I don't know what the hard rule is here in my area. I can't remember the last time we even had to contemplate it because it was never even an option to ride this early. So
Yeah, yeah, like, that's the thing. I know that I think it was Massart was saying last year when he was up in Canada, like we have to wait till we have a yellow, which is caution, there may be hazards. We have red, which is closed, and we have
mhm,
green, which is groomed, and you're good to go, right? So you can ride
mhm.
on yellow, but he said his trails were like basically whatever the date was to the end date, and if there's snow, you ride.
Oh yeah, you
Where
see it. You see it every year where like the first. I guarantee you, we'll see it this year. Let's say snap of a finger. If we get a bunch of snow tomorrow, there will be, even if the posts aren't up, there will be people that rode the trail route. It wasn't even groomed, it wasn't packed, but there was snow on the ground and it was legal and people will ride it for sure. So,
Yeah, yeah. We get that here when they're not closed. We even talked like our stakes at the roadside we have a red trail closed sign, and we didn't even bother putting them up this year because people don't listen. They just ride
oh
them
yeah.
anyway. You're supposed to default to the interactive trail guide, which is an app, or
Hmm.
the website for trail status, but people just don't listen. It's the entitlement thing, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's, I've had some discussions about this on my show, but out here in Minnesota, a lot of it's public land, but back home in Vermont and in New England, I'm sure the guys in the chat know, most of it's private land. So every single year somebody goes off trail, ruins somebody's yard or somebody's field. The guy says, all right, no more trails through my field, and the trails have to get rerouted. Like as a kid, I don't think you could use the trail map 2 years in a row. Every year there was some major reroute. So even out here, like anytime I'd ride with my friends and they'll like pull off to go ride a ditch, and it's public land, so they can, but it just messes with my head. I'm like, we can't go off trail. Like you can't do that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a cultural thing for depending on where you grew up riding, whether you think that's okay or whether you don't. So it's interesting.
Yeah, Minnesota has a lot of private land, Just Fly Low says. And it's the same up here. I mean, we have winter wheat, stay on trail, stay on trail. And that
Hmm.
was another thing we laughed about in the meeting recently was why do we need to say winter wheat, stay on trail? Because you're supposed to be on the trail anyway, right? Like,
Yeah.
and people they'll be winter wheat, stay on trail, or we'll lose the trail and there'll be sled tracks everywhere.
Hmm.
It's just, yeah, it's sad to see. So, you must talk to a lot of people in the industry and riders and things like that. I can tell just by, the way that you're structured there. Like, what is some common misconceptions that you think people that you've encountered that people think about snowmobiling, and what do you do to interact with them?
One that's come up quite a bit, and I emphasize it any chance I get, is probably just the power sports industry as a whole. People think it's a lot bigger than it really is. People think a lot of people at these major brands are just rolling in it, and that they just, there's a ton of money to be made in power sports, that the snowmobile industry is very big. And I've worked in the power sports industry, various roles for 10 years now, and there's not a lot of money to go around. It's a passion driven industry. I mean, prime example for you, Gary, nobody's paying you to go put up stakes on the trail. Like, you think those trails every year, they don't just show up. Like, people are volunteering their time. There's no money that's supporting other than, people paying or volunteering their time and stuff like that. But it's not like there's a business to be made there. Everything in power sports and in snowmobiling, it's a lot of passionate people using their own time, a lot of times their own money. So anytime somebody's like, how come we can't just be so much bigger? Or how come there's not just tons of sponsorship money flowing around? It's like, you ever looked at the stats of how many sleds are sold in a year and just equate that to a revenue metric? It's not that big. It's, it's big compared to some other spaces, but it's not really that. It's not as big as we think it is in our heads. So I just kind of show that as just like, any chance you have to buy from your local dealer or put in some time and volunteer or whatever you can do. Like, it's just not that big. I love it. It gives me a good lifestyle and all this kind of stuff, but it's not very big. So I just tell people to enjoy what you have with it and just do what you can to give back as much as you can.
Yeah. And that's really it. We always say that I think everybody that buys a permit here should have to go and knock on someone's door and ask for permission to use their land, because then they'll realize that it's not easy. It's we're out filming the when we had the roller skis on the XRS, and we were out shooting on the road, and a guy stopped, and we were just, we had just pulled over the side of the road and having a break, and a guy stopped and said to Drew, "You're pretty excited about it, but there's no snow for another couple months," because this is back in September. And then he goes, he said, "Yeah, the trail used to run right through my property." And I said, "Oh, where was that?" And he showed me, like, he said, "Oh, you just go over the hill and just the other side of the train tracks. And we have to ride along a huge road section here, right?" And I said, "Man, we'd love to have that trail back, because that would cut down a lot of road. Like it used to." I remember riding it when it was a trail and there was very little road riding. You just had to kind of go onto the 401 and then you're back on the trail again. And he goes, "You guys are never getting it back." And I said, "What happened?" And he goes, "People would let my livestock out. Like, no reason. Open up the farm gates, cows everywhere." It's like, how belligerent is that? Like, they say it's a privilege, not a right. And it's very true, but to actually have the gonads to open up livestock fencing and let things go wild. And that guy is like, and I said, "I don't blame you, like, it's not, he's got to go out then, and his house is away from this area. So he wouldn't have known until someone complained that there's cows on the road." But yeah, it's pretty crazy,
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, because all it does is it affects all of us. Obviously, it just creates a reputation or an image in someone's mind of what snowmobilers are. And I still fight this to this day. Like, I live on 5 acres. I have every right to ride my dirt bike in my yard, but I'm always scared that I'm going to piss off my neighbors, even though I have every right to do it. I just don't want to add to the reputation that motocross guys have, even though there's nothing. We're all just normal people. We just ride dirt bikes. It's the same with snowmobilers. Like, I love cans just as much as the next guy, but if your loud can is ultimately going to piss off a bunch of neighbors, those neighbors are going to hate all snowmobilers, not just your can. And then it's going to affect all of us. So I just, be respectful. Just understand that we are a fragile community, that, we have to build a good reputation with society. We're not as big as we once were. And just be grateful for what we have, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen, as they say, right?
For sure. For sure.
Hey, listen, do you want to check out some photos? You sent me in a lot of really good photos, and we'll keep the conversation going.
For sure.
Okay, listen, we're just going to hear from my buddies at Fast Track, and then we'll get right to the fan. We'll get right to the fan photos.
Sounds
you might
good.
learn some. You might learn something here. Listen up.
Fan photos are brought to you by Fast Track Snowmobile Traction. This season, quit sliding sideways on the ice and losing races to your buddies. A Fast Track stud kit will help you with improved braking and give you the arm-ripping acceleration you crave. I put over 3,000 clicks last season on my Renegade 850, and I'll tell you, these studs exceeded my expectations. Not one broken stud, my idle wheels still look like new, and they hooked up like I was on rails in the twisties, inspiring confidence every ride. Fast Track Top Gun kits are the highest rated stud kit at 4.9 stars with over 230 reviews. The studs are heat treated stainless so they are strong and they don't rust. The kit is lighter, easier on the track, and has a lifetime warranty against breaking. Each kit comes with a track specific template for complete balance with over double the scratch lines from stock templates. All listeners when purchasing a stud kit can get a free install kit, a $30 value. Visit fasttrack.co, add both products to the cart, and use the coupon code SNOW at the checkout. That's fasttrac.co.
Boom. Did you learn much there?
I learned I got to step my game up because your read's way better than mine. So,
yeah, and I'm like you. It's like I'm not in this industry. I'm not a DJ or you know what I mean? It's
yep.
Yeah, I'm just a little old Gary trying to, trying to make ends meet. So, but listen, everybody watching. So it's not Massart and Wisco sending in photos every week. Make sure you send in a fan photo at MUDBRATS.com before noon on Monday. Not like Spencer that sends them to me. Well, actually, I didn't. You sent them earlier. I was thinking it was 6:45 tonight, but.
No,
I put them in the podcast at 6:57 p.m. I wish there was a timestamp on them. You'd know.
Oh, yeah.
But listen, update on lodge sessions. More people came in last week. I didn't see Outdoor Hobby Guy yet, though. But listen, I handed over everything to Jim at Sportsman's Lodge. You can still email me if you want to get in. I definitely do want to know if you're coming. Corey and I need to know numbers for the poker run and anything else we might be doing. So it's important that you do reach out to me. You can send it to fanphoto@mudbrats.com or Gary at mudbrats.com. But if you happen to phone Jim, make sure you tell him you're with Snowmobile Sessions Group and we can put you in accordingly. So it's going to be a great time. It's going to be a really good time. I was excited about who came on board this week. So we'll just leave it at that. So it's this is from Greg Kelly. Here, I got to get rid of my name because it's blocking blocking up the name of the sender inner. Greg Kelly says Murphy's enjoying the snow up in Barry's Bay. Check that out.
Is that current? Is that how much snow you guys have?
Current. Yeah, that was today. He sent that to me. So not me. I don't have any snow.
No, I know. Yeah.
But this is not too far away from us. This is up in the in the snow belt area. That's why I think this Halliburton Forest area will be getting good. Now, Murphy doesn't have any legs. He's a dog that was born with no legs, front or back. So,
wow.
I'm just kidding. He does. It's a full-grown yellow lab or whatever he is, and he's buried deep.
Love it.
But yeah, Greg Kelly's coming to Lodge Sessions. Outdoor Hobby Guy. Why can't he? Says he can't make it. People like that. Jacob Massart was at Seminar Sports, his favorite dealer, and they've got a couple of elites sitting there. And he said they've even got one in a crate still.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
You want to talk about the OGs of snowmobile. Isn't that cool?
I really like, one of my cousins had the newer Elites, the one on the right, growing up, and I thought it was the coolest damn thing. And I'm amazed it never really truly took off for those guys, because I would have loved to have introduced my wife to snowmobiling in an Elite. That might have changed everything. So
Oh
big fan of
yeah.
those.
Why don't they come back? We have side by sides.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Come on.
I know.
Side by sides are huge. You can't tell me these guys wouldn't buy an Elite, especially if they're legal on snowmobile trails.
I would, devil's advocate, I would be curious what MSRP on an Elite would be if you built it in 2023. It might be pretty expensive.
Yeah, but have you seen the MSRP on a side by side?
Yeah, exactly.
People will spend it. I think so. Give them a 60 or 70 year lease, and they'll be good to go. Right?
All I'm saying, in the US right now, financing is at like 8%. I don't think anybody's buying one of those, but
we're at just over 6, I think. Some power sports are less. Dave Brennan says the Elite was cool. The older one was nimble. Yeah, it's pretty wild. And that's it. That's it for my fan photos this week. It'll get more as we get more snow out there and get her rolling. So we're back into your photos now. So you're a big snowcross racer. Have you got any accolades under your belt?
Please. No, I was just, I was like a mid-pack guy. I had some wins out east and out here a couple times on some regional stuff, but I was okay. I was not super fast or anything, but I loved all the time I was racing. And I think, not being like super fast or, a big winning guy, I think it gave me a different appreciation. Like, I was just out there because I enjoyed it a lot and I like to progress. So yeah, I raced for a number of years and developed a passion for it. But yeah, I think this picture is Plattsburgh, New York, 2013, East Coast Snowcross. Their second round was in Plattsburgh, New York. So, that was after one of the first or second heat. So that was like my first or second race I had ever done. And that track was super whooped out, super gnarly. That was a Triple Crown round for East Coast Snowcross and SCM, who's the Quebec snowcross circuit. So anytime you get French Canadians on sleds down there, those guys are just stupid fast, obviously. So learning curve.
They were born with it. Yeah, those
no
French Canadians are born with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that right, outdoor hobby guy? So how old were you when you started racing?
I started racing pretty late. I think I was like 17, which, I mean, it was cool, but if you start racing that late, you're way behind the 8 ball with a lot of those guys. So, I rode trails a lot growing up, so I knew how to ride a snowmobile, but snowcross was a whole different animal when I got into it. So I picked it up pretty quickly, like knew what I had to do. I always had this mentality that I love racing, but I don't want to get hurt like too bad. And when I was racing against these like 15-year-old kids who would just throw caution to the wind and didn't care, it was always tough to compete with those guys. But yeah, it was fun. Started racing pretty late though.
Yeah. So you never got up to pro, but you were like, where were you? Like
I made it up to the sport class regionally, and I never made it above sport light on the national level. So again, I was never crazy fast or anything like that, but I was a regular weekend warrior guy. I was always there. I was paying my entry fees and I was racing and I was having a ball. Lot of great friends made racing. It was always a family sport for my dad and I and stuff like that. So yeah, it was just fun. I love the sport, even though I never made any money, never have stacks and stacks of trophies, but I still love it to this day.
That's pretty cool. No, we know guys like that. I sponsored a local guy here, Jacob Fight, and I helped him out with some graphics and things like that. And he had a couple of really good races, but he was just doing it more for fun than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And he rode a Polaris IQ as well.
Nice. Nice.
Launch mode and you name it, right?
Oh yeah.
What do you think of the new sleds coming out with launch mode? Have you tried one yet?
I have not. No. I haven't ridden a race sled in 6 six years, something like that, or anything like that. So it's been a minute. I always try and get back on it. Every year I say I'm going to ride more, and then before I know it, it's March, and I didn't ride any more than the year before.
Yeah. Do you have any aspirations to get back out and do one fun race or anything like that?
I would love to. I maybe not a snow cross track, but I'd love to do some cross country. Like I got into racing hare scrambles on my dirt bike the last couple years, and I ride mountain bikes a lot in the summertime. So I'd love to get into a cross country race, but spoiler alert to anybody listening, snowmobile racing is stupid expensive. I don't like, unless you're doing your local vintage stuff, it's so expensive. So it's kind of like either you go all in or you don't. There's no like gray area in the middle. So maybe someday.
Yeah. Back in the day, and when you talk to people like MJ Thompson and stuff, and she said that the only reason she raced was because they got free parts. Like that's how they enticed racers to join on, right?
Yeah.
That's not like that anymore. You need a lot of deep pockets, and you need sponsors on board.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Here we go. We got a couple classics here.
Yeah, that's a cool one. So the one on the left, that was my first snowmobile I ever had. I think I was like in first grade, so I was probably like 7 years old or something like that. But it was a 02 MXZ 380, and I thought I was the coolest kid in town with that thing rolling around. So I'm sure some of the guys in the chat remember, but those sleds had the push button reverse on them. So that thing had electric start and push button reverse. So I could do anything with that thing. Like it was super slick. So yeah, that was my first sled. And then the one on the right was Bangor, Maine, like 2015 or something like that, after practice. So yeah, it was just cool putting them side by side. Like it would have been like a 10 or a 15-year gap there, but still just riding sleds, still loving it. So yeah, that one's pretty cool.
That's pretty wild. I didn't think that the 380s had the reverse. That's pretty interesting you say that. My buddy had that same sled with the 500 in it.
Yep.
And I don't know whether his maybe had a mechanical reverse or no reverse at all. We called it Dirty Sanchez because it looks like it's got a little mustache on the front.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Yeah. That one had it, and then the Legend, basically the same sled but more, but the Legend 380 had the push button as well, and super cool piece of kit. Like it reversed the engine, it would shut off. It is super cool for the time for sure.
Yeah, that must have been the first RER, right? Like if it was a button and it reversed the engine, where the mechanicals were in the gear case. But yeah, pretty cool. You like your trailing arm sleds, that's for sure.
I do. Yeah, this is a cool one. So my junior year of high school, my dad and I built a wooden ramp just for the yard. Back in Vermont, we lived on like 10 acres, so I'd build a snowcross track in the yard and stuff like that. And my dad was an electrician, so he worked in construction, so he was super handy and stuff like that. So yeah, we built that ramp. And I was sponsored by an excavation company. So at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the winter, I'd get a skid steer for like a week, just build all kinds of stuff in the field. And so we'd pull out the ramp, and I built a landing and all this kind of stuff. So I had that ramp for a couple of years. I think some kid in Vermont jumps it with his dirt bike these days, but that thing was super cool, super fun. Yeah, it was really scary hitting it the first time, because obviously like nobody had hit it. Like we built it, nobody had hit it before. There was no knowledge of like how the suspension was going to compress, like how it was going to go. But yeah, it was super fun. A lot of fun afternoons with that ramp for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Man, you were getting some good air there. How much stuff did you break? And how was any of it on your body? That's what I want to know.
I got hurt. Fortunately, I was lucky. I didn't get hurt a ton. The worst one I had it's really unfortunate. It was my senior year of high school. It was the second race of the season in Plattsburgh. And if there's any East Coast snowcross guys in the chat, they'll know it. But at Airborne Speedway, right off the start, there was just this really long straightaway that was all rhythm. So you just pin it right off the start, going right into this rhythm, super sketchy. And my tunnel got landed on, so my sled flipped over, and then I got run over in the rhythm section. And I got a concussion. I pulled a bunch of ligaments in my back. I was pretty tweaked. I was pretty messed up. And the worst part was that my high school had this policy where if you have a concussion, until you don't have any symptoms for 3 days, you can't go to school. So I was this 18-year-old kid. My mom had to drive me to school because I wasn't allowed to drive. And then she had to pick me up in the middle of the day because I wasn't allowed to go for the whole day. And my school was like 45 minutes away because I was in rural Vermont. So that was, it sucked just being a high school student and having to deal with all that crap. But too, like, that was like my second year race. Like, there was a lot of growth that was going to happen in that year. That was my senior year. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with racing, and I missed like the whole year just sitting on the couch. So yeah, it was tough. But that was probably my biggest injury for sure.
Yeah. And what about sleds, sled parts?
I wasn't too bad, just because I wasn't crazy fast, so I wasn't like a super aggressive rider. So I didn't have a ton of sled issues and stuff like that. But one kind of fire drill we did have one time was my senior year. I was running my sled just on the jack stand, warming it up outside in front of my house, and I just heard this massive like kapow, and I pull it open, and my a bearing on my connecting rod had finally gone, and the rod just punched a hole right in the side of the case. And so, just total loss in terms of the engine as a whole. Clutching's still good and everything like that, but just the cylinder and everything like that, crank is just junk. And that's like $1,000 repair, and I'm not in a position to just foot that bill. Like, that's not something we can just do. So I was scrambling, like texting all my friends, like, hey, and we have a race like a week after that. I'm like, hey, can I rent a sled? Anybody got a sled I can borrow and all this kind of stuff? And yeah, we ended up finding a guy in upstate New York that was rebuilding IQR engines, and he had a crate engine that he had just done. So, but other than that one, which still, I wake up at night in a cold sweat thinking about that connecting rod. Other than that, we didn't have too many mechanicals.
That's sweet. What kind of advice would you give someone that's thinking about getting into snowcross?
I would say it's going to be very expensive for sure. And I would say keep your expectations low, only because it's incredibly competitive, but definitely start on a regional level and just go there to have fun and go there to learn. Get as much seat time as you can. At the beginning, you're only racing against yourself and the track. Like, don't worry about anybody else. And that's one thing that is tough in the snowcross world. There's not a ton of places to practice other than the race. I know Compound at Muskoka, those guys have a practice track for CSRA guys. So there's definitely
you're tuned into this. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Oh yeah. So, you can definitely ride there. And then obviously there's a lot of tracks here in Minnesota as well. So just get as much seat time as you can, and don't really worry about what your results are or anything like that. Just ride the track and get it figured out on your own time for sure.
If you were good enough to hit that mark and become pro, is there money to be made in it still, like there was back in the day?
There is, but it's kind of the 80-20. Like, there's only a handful of guys really making some good money racing snowmobiles, guys and girls. Most of the people, they'll make, the high level guys at least, they'll make enough money to cover their living in the wintertime, but then they still have a full-time job from April to November. So if you're really good, there's definitely money to be made, but there's probably a lot more money to be spent making that money. So,
if I'm not going to start snowmobile racing at 55, what else do you suggest I do?
I don't know, man.
I had my whole sight set on racing this year.
You know, it's the funny thing is there's a handful of guys. Like I look at a guy like Justin Tate, who's been around the sport of snowmobile racing forever, and he's still stupid fast. He's like a Mike Brown in motocross, like just aging like fine wine, still out there racing, still cashing contingency checks, still fast as hell. So it's funny. Like there's some guys that'll never get slower, but then there's guys like me who might never get faster. So you gotta take it.
Yeah. You know, I don't know about race sleds. Like the suspension probably hasn't changed all that much from when you raced. Like it's not like you're seeing innovations like smart shocks or anything like that being used on the race circuit. It's basically rider, right?
Yeah, they've definitely made some advances in the internals of the shocks, and you know, companies like Walker Evans or like Fox, they continue to kind of push the envelope in suspension, but a lot of it ends up coming down to engineering on the sled, like, you know, and then as you said, obviously the rider too, but it's changing geometry in the suspension of the A-arms, the spindles, the skid. That's where I think a lot more gains are made these days, because suspension continues to evolve every year. But again, like you said, the suspension's really only as good as the rider who's using it. So you can make amazing suspension and amazing race sled, but if you put a guy on it that can't ride it, he's only going to go so fast. So
yeah, that's true. So I shouldn't race is what you're saying.
I'd love to get out. I mean, I just turned 28 a couple months ago. I'm counting down the days until I can race a plus 30 class, whether it's my dirt bike or my snowmobile. I'm counting down the days.
Yeah, I do a vintage motocross enduro race every year.
Yeah,
and what a hoot that is! I actually won my class this year.
Oh, really?
Didn't know it. Dislocated my shoulder. I was like 14th going into the second heat. Had a really good second race, and after it finished, I was so sore. I just went home and I sat on the dock and cracked a beer. And then the organizer messaged me and said, "Where are you?" And I said, I'm at the cottage having a drink. And she said, "Get your ass down here. You won first place."
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. And I've got a full story on that, but I owe it all to a little kid on a little RM80 that I thought was a guy on a YZ250 that was the guy to beat. And I thought it was him behind me most of the heat. And then I finally, when we got to the motocross track, big bush section, you end up with one lap on the track. I went, this guy's going to leave me on the track. I don't have my chops on an MX track anymore. I let him pass, and it was this little kid on an RM80.
Yep.
Yeah, it was like, what? So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I still do that. Yeah, you got to keep doing it when you hit your 30, 40s. You know, I did tries when I was 30, right? Like that's now I'm out of shape. I'm like more couch to couch kind of thing instead of couch to track. Yeah. So.
I hear that.
All Terrain TV says, MUDBRATS, that's awesome. You won the race. You should try a local lake cross rake. You just need good studs. Probably the safest kind of racing beside a drag raider run. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, you heard of that?
That stuff's gnarly. I've seen a lot of videos of guys doing that, and I would imagine it's really cool, but the first couple laps, it's got to mess with your head, because it just makes no sense in your head. Like, how am I actually hooking up right now? How am I not just completely washing out? Why are my hands cold? I'm on a dirt bike. Like, it's got to mess with your head for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I used to ride dirt bikes when I was a kid, because I grew up in the country, and I used to ride them all year round. Right. So riding on slippery snow, and I've had the thing wash right out in front of me. I don't think I'd want to do that anymore, you know? So
for sure.
But, yeah. And I chipped my collarbone. I went in afterwards I went into a physiotherapist to get treatment. About a month afterwards, I was still in pain. And when I got back on the bike, I could feel it out, and then it popped back in from riding in the race, first race. And it popped back in, but it's still sore. So then I went to physiotherapy, and the guy runs his hand along it, and he goes, have you seen your doctor yet? And I go, no. And he goes, there's something going on there.
he goes, I won't do any more work on you until you get an x-ray. And yeah, sure enough. Yeah. So then they keep bugging me to go in for follow-up, and I'm going like, you're not going to put a cast on it. So I'm just going to live with it. What are we looking at here? This picture is epic.
Yeah. That's one of my favorites. That was Bangor, Maine, first round of East Coast Snowcross 2015, January 2015, something like that. I have a weird memory for dates, and it's weird. But yeah, so that was first round, and that was at the fairgrounds in Bangor, and really cool track, really good condition. It's obviously made for some cool pictures, but yeah, that was a fun race. I think I won my first heat that weekend, which was super cool. So that was my freshman year of college. So I got out to that round when I was home for Christmas, and then second round that year was in Schaghticoke, New York. So I hit that round, and then I literally got back from that round at 11:30 at night with my mom, and my flight the next morning from Boston back to Minnesota was at 10 a.m. So I was pretty wrecked.
Wow.
But gotta do what you gotta do if you want to race.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So what do you think is the most important piece of safety equipment when you're racing, but also on the trails?
I would say, I'm guilty of it. I never wear a tech vest when I ride on the trails, but I would never be caught anywhere near a snowcross track without a tech vest. And then, very controversial these days, I still wear a neck brace. I still wear a Liette neck brace. A lot of guys have kind of reverted away from it, but when I get on my dirt bike or if I ever get back on a snowcross track and I don't have a neck brace, I feel naked. I feel vulnerable. So I'm a big fan of the neck brace. I think they've come a long way, and they're extremely valuable. So any haters, it's fine, but I need my neck brace for sure.
Yeah, that's something I don't see a lot on the trails, but definitely on the track, you need something like that. And tech vest, we all love. I mean, I think the majority of us in the chat wear them, if not everybody.
For sure.
So, yeah, it's interesting. Everybody has their own thing. It's outside of the safety gear. What do you have a secret tip or a secret piece of equipment that you can't ride without?
The one that, as soon as I was able to actually experience it, I've never been able to go back, is anti-fog goggles. I've never been able, ever since I got introduced to them, using them once, I've never been able to go away from them. And to a fault, anybody that wears an open face helmet with goggles, they understand when you find a helmet with a goggle and it seals perfectly, it's very difficult to ever buy a different helmet or different goggles. I spent years, I just mentioned on I just did an episode with Nathan Titus, and he used to work at WPS and fly for many years. And I told him, I was like, the first time I ever wore 999 goggles and a Fly F2 carbon, and the fit was so great, and it didn't let in any cold air, and there was no fog. I wore that exact combination for 5 years. I always wore 999s, and I always wore Fly, because I'm like, if I deviate at all and my goggles fog up even a second, I am going to be so mad. So, yeah, a good seal goggle, anytime you can have good vision, that's probably the biggest thing for me.
When you trail ride, you wear an MX style helmet and goggles, do you? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's tough because it's, I wear them, they're tinted, but anytime it gets slightly dark outside, then you got to carry a clear pair, in the handlebar bag or whatever. So I've just, whether it's my motorcycle or my dirt bike, I've just always had a moto style helmet. I like being able to hear. I like, hearing the engine and stuff like that. I like the airflow. So I don't know. I definitely have gotten a lot of frostbite over the years because of it, but I definitely prefer that style for sure.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's your most important piece of kit. Mine's a roll of toilet paper.
It's fair. It's fair. I can't argue with you.
Yeah. There's that jump again. That's wild. Do you know what your furthest is that you've ever jumped?
It can't be that far. I don't know. It's got to be I don't know, 50 feet, something like that. Like it can't be that far. It's snow cross tracks. There's usually like a big double or a big triple. It's kind of a staple. And I cleared them a couple times. I probably jumped the farthest in my yard when I had like with this ramp, when I had the ability to just move it around and sculpt it how I wanted. So I was never a big jump guy. Like looking back at these pictures now, this was like, 18-year-old Spencer. I would never hit that jump today, 10 years later. No chance. But yeah, back then I had some bigger balls back then for sure.
Yeah, nice. That's the thing. Everybody thinks they look like that when they ride. I know I do, but I'd be more closer to the bottom there.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, here you are on a Skidoo. What
Yeah.
the heck's going on here?
Yeah, my last 2 years I raced Skidoo. Just the sled was really good, and there was a dealership down in southern New Hampshire, DeSilva Motorsports. Jake DeSilva and his crew, they always took really good care of me with sleds and stuff like that. So this picture is super cool because that was my first time ever racing the Duluth National. So that was a really cool experience for me. And I moved out to Minnesota. I went to the University of Minnesota Duluth. So I moved to Duluth for college specifically because of that race. Like I'd never been to the state of Minnesota prior to move-in day my freshman year. So like actually lining up on that track, like with, obviously it's a little faded, but with the backdrop of Lake Superior and all that, like that's such an amazing event. And now that they don't have it as the season opener anymore, it's cool to look back on the pictures and know that I raced it a couple times at least. So that was super cool.
Yeah, that's neat. Well, Duluth is the name. When you hear any pro racer talk, that's one that comes up.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Wild. You were a skinny little guy then.
I was a beanpole for a long time. I'm a little bigger now for sure. But yeah, I was a rail back then, no doubt.
That's funny. So you pick a college to go to just because it's the racing mecca. I love it.
Yeah, it worked out, but yeah, it was really funny at the time. Like I remember in like my senior year of high school, I was like, well, hey, look, there's a college in Duluth. Well, if I get in, that's where I'm going. And yeah, like flying in there, like orientation day, it was super cool. I was like riding around town with my brother, like, hey, that's where the snowcross is. That's Spirit Mountain right there. So
that's pretty cool.
The city of Duluth always holds a special place in my heart for sure.
Yeah, that's neat. Where did you put your sled? Did your parents bring it in on a trailer, or did you bring it to school with you?
Oh, it was always a scramble. So, my mom was living in southern New Hampshire, and that's where I was, like my home base in between school. So the sled was purchased from DeSilva's, and then another East Coast guy, because every year a lot of the East Coast guys would come out and race Duluth because it was the first race of the year for anybody. So Joe Bishop, another East Coast snowcross guy, he drove my sled out in his trailer. We'd go up to Planet X, or now it's called the Climb Compound, Shearing Speed Sports. And I'd ride a couple laps there, try and get some time in, but I was still in school. So like I'd go back to school that night. So that was the story that year. And then Joe brought it back and I went to go pick it up in upstate New York over Christmas break. And then the following year, it got brought out by the Patnodes. So Hunter Patnode now is a pro snowcross racer, races for Shearing, and his brother Leo, crazy fast as well. So those guys were from Vermont like me. So they drove my sled out that year. And then I had met a guy in college who lived locally here in Minneapolis that was also racing on the Nationals. So he's like, hey, if you want, you can store your sled at our house down in Minneapolis. And so, yeah, my sled was down here and his dad was like working on my sled. And then anytime there was a race, they'd cram it into their trailer and then we'd drive out. And yeah, it's just funny because, yeah, the guy's name was Andrew. He's still one of my best friends. He was in my wedding. I was in his wedding. Like lifelong friendships made from snowmobile racing. So you love to see it.
Yeah, I love it. I love hearing stories like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is your announcement where your logo where you added the Woodies to it. That's pretty cool. Congrats again on that.
I appreciate
Awesome.
it. Yeah, super stoked for that, no doubt.
Yeah, more to come too, I'm sure of it. You know,
yeah.
I didn't realize you're that new at it. You got a lot of episodes under your belt. Where can people find you? Like, you want to give a shout out to your social channels now? And
Yeah, for sure. So Facebook page is the Carbide Podcast, and Instagram as well. Follow me on both of those things. I basically post some cool throwback photos, some cool reels every single day. And then I usually tease if there's a big episode coming, there'll be a tease there. And then I always post. Lately, it's been an episode comes out at like 6 a.m. every single Monday. So there'll be a post Monday of who it is with some cool pictures about what they did and stuff like that. So yeah, check out the social channels, and then pretty much anywhere you find podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcast, anywhere you'd find a podcast, search it out. And then if you can't find it, in Facebook and Instagram, there's a link tree that sends you out to all the different links of where you can listen as well. If not, just message me and I'll shoot you links too.
yeah, right on. Yeah, it's everyone's phone. If you're using an iPhone, has Apple Podcasts, or the little green icon with the little white bands on it, like a Wi-Fi symbol. That's your Spotify, and it's free. You just open it up and search Snowmobile Sessions or the Carbide Podcast, and you hit follow, and you can download the podcast every week to listen in your car on the go. It's a lot of people didn't know that. I had another podcaster on Sled Addicts Nation last year, and we talked about that, and people are going, I don't even know what it is. I've never used it. So, but I mean, I got close to, it might even be over it now, but 50,000 downloads. So it's, people are listening and they're tuning in, and you get people every week sending you in. I've had fan photos from guys that go, I listen in my car, and because they can't catch it here live. So,
for sure. Yeah. And anybody that's listening, make sure you hit the follow button, because that works wonders for Gary and I. Like the listens are great, but the follower number is extremely important. So if you're listening every week, make sure you hit the follow button for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And right now, hit the like button on this video, you know, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. But yeah, it's something that, I mean, it's a different world. SledTube said that's brain overload. Repeat it for the rest of us. But I'll do a little intro. But go on your phone, swipe down till you get the search, type in podcasts, and Apple Podcasts will come up. And then in that, just hit search and search for ours. The Carbide Podcast, search for Snowmobile Sessions. Hit follow on both of them. And then every time you're in the car, plug your phone in and listen while you drive. It's pretty awesome.
Absolutely.
When I have a crappy episode, I'll actually enhance the audio, so it sounds more like one of Spencer's podcasts, not one of mine. You know,
I don't know, man. I'm just doing a janky at home pod, just like you are. So
yeah,
do what we can.
It's so funny because with Ryan last year, his equipment and my equipment are so totally different. Even with you with the podcast mic, I had a mic years ago, and it was causing me more problems. So I've just gone with the lapel mic now, and the big headphones. You know, it's something that, you know, I'll use my wireless headphones, but because it doesn't matter how good a sound I have, I'm only as good as the sound of you or the guest that's phoning in.
Oh yeah,
you know,
it's
you can get some pretty crappy ones, is what I'm trying to say. You know,
it is funny. This mic sounds pretty decent, but I also like, just because it's easy when I work, it's all just USB. So I plug it into my work laptop, and then if I'm on like a Teams call or something, I use it too. It sounds like garbage in Teams, but it sounds pretty decent on the podcast software. So it's always hit or miss for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know. And I mean, you do yours remotely as well, right? So you have people phone in by Zoom or whatever it is.
Yeah, for the most
or whatever. whatever.
For the most part,
software
I
you use?
just upgraded to get to do some in-person interviews here. I'm kind of building out you can kind of see I'm kind of building out a mini studio at my house. So we're going to be able to do some in-person ones coming up soon. But yeah, so far it's just been all online. So, most people don't have high-end mics and stuff like that. So you take what you can get. It's pretty raw, but I think it's cool that way too.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I beat myself up on how am I going to do this and how can I get better sound? And it's like you almost have to send a mic out to the person that's going to be on, and
Yep.
that can get pretty pricey, right?
Oh yeah.
Then
And
if you have a lousy internet connection, then that just throws it all out the window anyway, right?
oh yeah. And you're dealing with people on the other end where you're like, hey, I'm going to send you a link. Just join it. But it's never that simple. It never
No.
works out that way. And then you got to troubleshoot on the fly and all this. Yeah, it's a nightmare at times, but it's fun.
Oh, so you've watched me trying to log into my own show then. That's good. So I know you watch every week.
Oh man.
What are you holding here?
That was a cross country race in northern Maine, Jackman. I think it was in Jackman, Maine, and I got like third or something in the sport class, which was cool only because, as you can see, that was my snowcross sled. Like it was clutched like a snowcross sled, suspension was snowcross, but it was the only race. Like I was home for that weekend and there was like one race and all it was cross country. So got like third in the sport class, which was pretty cool. So that plaque's actually here in my office on the wall, which is pretty cool. So it's cool to relive that.
That's awesome. Do you run CNAs and clutching and anything else on your trail sleds?
I still run rocks handguards, because that's another one of those ones where once you like run really high quality handguards, it's tough to go back. I don't run CNAs on my trail sled currently. I'd like to. Just I can only throw so much money at my old sled before before it's not really worth it. But that's one kind of cool thing is coming from the race side. There's so many of these manufacturers or these brands that also make trail components. So you're like, well, I ran you in snowcross, much like Woody's. I ran Woody's in snowcross for years, so I know the quality, I know how good it is, and I know I want it on my trail sled. So it's cool to kind of explore those brands in a different space and different products that you didn't get to, utilize in your racing years.
Yeah, nice. And here we go. I love the pictures of this. That's a gorgeous RS.
Yeah, that's that same year as that other Duluth shot. So that's also in Duluth. So yeah. That's
like
such
2016 or 17, was it?
Yeah, 2016 season. So it was American Thanksgiving of 2015. And yeah, that was a fun race. And it's always good when you can have, like, obviously cold weather and good snow conditions, but anytime it's blue sky, just the track, the definition is great, and it's super fun. And that was very much the case that year.
Nice. How like many laps were they?
They weren't terribly long. I'd say probably our heats were like 4 laps or so, and then a final would have been 6 maybe. So it wasn't crazy long. So it wasn't too bad. Yeah,
there's another one there. Yet, like on the RS, did you have any mishaps or any bad hard landings?
I did have a couple so this is the 16-17 season. I had a couple funny mishaps towards the end of the year. We broke like a shock bushing like a week before the last race of the year. And it was a core power sports race. So it was like a hill cross series. So frantically trying to find who has this really wonky size bushing, like, 2 days before the race. So that was kind of a headache. And then there's we did a race at Lutsen, Minnesota that year as well. Hill climb, hill cross, stuff like that. And I didn't even know what happened until I got off the track. But at the end of I won the race, and then I got back down to the bottom of the hill. I look back and my entire brake light on the back of the tunnel is gone. I'm like, what the hell happened to that? And they're like, what are you talking about? That guy landed on your tunnel. It's like, what? When did that happen? And they showed me a video. And yeah, like the first jump on the way up the hill, some guy landed on the back of my tunnel, rolled his sled and crashed. But I didn't even feel it the whole time. Like I didn't even notice it at the time, didn't feel it, just kept on going. So yeah, that those sleds were pretty bulletproof back then. So we didn't have a ton of issues. Definitely more user error, more me not clearing something. But that was a fun year. I got to race a lot that year. That was fun.
Corey says it's not often you see a snowcross sled without a wrap on it. You didn't have very many sponsors on this. Was this just basically unboxed and rode?
Yeah. My biggest sponsor that year was my wallet. Always appreciate the support of my wallet. Always, since day one, always been there for me. But yeah, I just, I kept it stock, and that year actually really cool for a lot of people like they can appreciate stock graphics. I'm definitely one of those people, but that year at the end of the year, I ended up with a 2016 600 RS mod. It was an old shearing speed sports sled. I got it just like the last couple rounds. I thought it'd be fun for the Hillcross stuff, and it had no graphics on it. So I bought all the 2017 OEM graphics and put them all like on the mod hood and all that stuff. So it's basically like a stock looking mod sled. Yeah, it was pretty sweet. So I like stock graphics. Neat. I think they look cool. So
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And just build on it, add to them kind of thing, right?
For sure.
Yeah, pretty wild.
Yeah.
How many races would you say you've done in your whole career?
I would say not a ton really, maybe 30. It's not a super high number when you really think about it, because that's a couple years. There's only 8 rounds or 7 or 8 rounds in a year, so it feels like a lot more just because you spend so much time at the track, but maybe only like 30 races total. But I was like I said earlier, I wasn't crazy fast at snowcross, so anytime there was a race that I could race my snowmobile, I was down to see if I could do it, whether it was snowcross or cross country or something. So if there was a place to race in the weekend, I was there.
That's sweet. Do you still have this onesie? It is awesome.
I do. I still have those pants and that shell. I'm not a hoarder, but I love like memorabilia and I have all my old helmets still. I have all my old jerseys and stuff like that. So anybody that loves like early 2000s snowcross, they know how like sought after the shells are and stuff like that, the jerseys. So I definitely hung on to that one because I thought that was a cool look for sure.
Yeah, I can't say I recall seeing that combination with the orange and the high vis yellow and black all used in one piece like that. So it is a separate jacket and pants, you're saying, right?
Yep. Yeah. Every year. It's kind of cool. So Polaris doesn't do it. Cat used to do it. They don't do it anymore. But Skidoo is like the only one who actually offers like their own shell, like their own race gear that you want to buy. So anytime you buy the race sled, they give you the opportunity to buy the pants, the shell, and the pit coat. So I still have my Skidoo pit coat, my X Team pit coat from that year. I still have all that gear just because it looks so cool. So I never wear it anymore because I'm not going to wear it on the trail. It's not very warm, but it looks really cool. It moves really well. So yeah, I hung on to all that for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually put a little qualification on that. Like it looks cool at a race, but don't wear it to the snowmobile show, okay, in October.
No, they're all like, because obviously they're all designed to be like to allow you to move really well. So they're all like super, super thin. So, I mean, that was that shot right there is from Canterbury, and anybody that's ever raced Canterbury, crazy cold every single year. So I think that year it was 3 or 4 degrees Fahrenheit without the wind chill, like the whole weekend. So you got all these crazy thin, shell and pants, and then you got like thin moto gloves on. and then you're only on the track for like 5 minutes. So it's not even long enough for your heated grips to really start to take effect. So it, you look cool, but you only want to be out there for like 5 minutes. Then you want to get bundled right back up.
You're working though. Like when the race starts, you can't be cold, right?
Nah.
You're moving around so much.
Yeah, the adrenaline kicks in and you don't feel it a ton, but you'll see it even to this day. Like guys on the starting line, they'll get off and then they'll put their hand under the exhaust and they'll rev the throttle a little bit, just to warm up their hands before they race. So that's if you see anybody ever do that on the trails, you know that they raced at one point in time. It's an old habit that dies hard for sure.
That's great. We talk about this? Did you race motocross at all?
I didn't race a ton growing up. I rode motocross a lot growing up. I never raced. I did get into racing hare scrambles the last couple years, but I can't jump a dirt bike to save my life. For whatever reason, like I rode quads for a number of years when I was racing snowcross, and that felt way more like a snowmobile. So I was way more comfortable with that, but a dirt bike in the air just scares me. Like I can jump a little bit, but I can't jump enough to be fast on a moto track. It's just too scary for me.
That's funny you say that, because I think that jumping a skidoo like this is the most insane thing a person can do, next to jumping a four-wheeler in a race. Four-wheeler racers should probably be, put in a rubber room when they're not racing.
Oh yeah. People would always complain because I would ride. There's a couple of tracks in New England that allow quads every now and again. But it was always at the same time the moto guys were riding. So they'd always complain that we were breaking up the ruts and stuff like that. And I'm like, you ever tried going up a face of a jump where there's two different ruts going two different directions and you're going to hit both of them? Like quad guys don't like riding moto tracks either. I can assure you of that.
Yeah. The flat tracks, I like the quads though, because it takes the grooves out, right? On the flat track ride. So I know, I was curious because you're mentioning about the rubbing is racing type of thing. You didn't even know what hit, but if you're riding motocross or any type of motorcycle racing, you're in there, but you don't have the weight of the sled to manage, So
exactly.
Mike Galitz was asking what kind of dirt bikes you had growing up or have now.
First bike was an XR50, a Honda. Big fan of that thing. Still an all-time favorite for me. And then I had a couple other bikes growing up, but mostly just trail bikes because we didn't ride moto a ton. And then these days I have a YZ250F that doesn't get ridden nearly as much as it should, but I get out when I can for sure.
Do you have tracks nearby that you can go and have fun on, or are you just bush riding?
We do. There's actually there's a pretty good moto community here in Minnesota. Cambridge, Millville, a lot of tracks that are really good here. I'd like to ride in the woods a lot more. I like single tracks. So there's a handful of spots we can ride, but if you're a moto guy, Minnesota's a good spot. Good moto culture here for sure.
Yeah. Oh, here's some snert.
Yeah, that's a cool shot. So that friend I had mentioned earlier that I met in college, that's Andrew in the back on that IQR. So that's always a cool shot. But that last year, ERX Motor Park in Elk River had this snow oval at the end of the year. Like it was, I don't know, your lap time was legit, maybe like 10 seconds. So it was just a straight oval. And obviously you can see the snow conditions were god awful, but it was so fun. Like you basically just had like a 10 lap sprint in this super short track. So I won a bunch of trophies. I won a bunch of classes that weekend. And it was a little bit cheating because it was all about the start. Because there was no main line. There was no anything. Like it was really just who got the start. So any of the guys that showed up on race sleds that were clutched the way they were, we just got out front right at the beginning and nobody could touch us. So yeah, that was a fun weekend for sure.
That's wild. He has teeth on the hood of his sled.
He does. Who
the hell puts teeth on their snowmobile wrap?
He had that on a lot of his sleds. It was super cool. He's going for kind of like a P40 kind of vibe there.
Yeah.
It's kind of his
Yeah.
thing. So they're pretty cool for sure. He always had cool graphic schemes. I think he still has his 2017 race sled, and it still has shark teeth on the front. It's pretty sweet.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've got teeth on mine. Yeah. Outdoor Hobby Guy says, great show, and he gives us a flexing muscle. That's for me, and he gives you one of those. That must be for you. Some bald guy. Yeah. Mike's answering the question of who puts teeth on their sled. He says some bald guy. LaPointe want to know if that's dirt cross. Is that dirt cross? This is what Ontario would look like, I think, in most cases.
Those are those were the worst to those rounds. Like just, like the roofs was just brown. It was sticky. It was awful.
Yeah. This is what a yellow trail looks like in southwestern Ontario.
This is a cool shot. So this is actually that mod sled that I was talking about that has all the stock graphics on it. So that was the last race of the year. That was at Lutsen, so northern Minnesota. That's Lake Superior in the background. So it was at a ski mountain. And that weekend, it was like 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So you basically got a t-shirt on under your tech vest. Like it was awesome. And yeah, so super warm, super great weather, a lot of fun racing. And it was just cool. Like after you'd finish the race, you'd turn around and then you just had all of Lake Superior like right in front of you. So that was a cool round for sure.
That is very sweet. How muddy did you get on a race like this? It must have been just crazy.
There was a couple, there was a cross country race that same, for the same series at that same track. So I got roosted a couple of times, and that's one of the nice things about snowmobile racing is you never really have to wash your gear if it's a good winter because it just gets wet. It doesn't get dirty. End of that year, I had to pressure wash everything. It was just caked on. But it was fun. It was a cool memory for sure.
Yeah, that would be very wild. Corey said that's what he and I ride all the time, right there. Yeah, it's true.
I believe it's
true. With less views. We have some good views. I can't say that. The number 194, is it special for some reason?
It's a little unique. So just when I started racing, I was trying to get something cool. And so it's just my initials. So S is the 19th letter in the alphabet and D is the 4th. So kind of cool.
Pretty cool. Yeah. I was just handed one at the race and went, here you go, you're 72.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
It's one of the cool things about snow is because it's so much smaller, you get the ability to actually pick your number. It's not like moto where they're like, here's a list of available numbers, take it or leave it. You actually get to pick them in snow. So it's kind of cool.
That is really cool, right? Unless you're number 7 and then you have to put C next to it.
Yeah. Who would ever want to do that? Yeah, exactly. 7C or 47C, like who would ever want to do that?
Okay. I just noticed something on this picture. I'm so glad I didn't click off of it yet. But he's got a rubber chicken strapped to the hood. I love it.
Yeah, that was a joke from my friend Andrew. So the previous year they had one guy on their team that rode a skidoo, and he had put a rubber chicken on the front of his sled, and that guy was no longer racing. So I showed up the last round of the year, and his dad had been working on my sled that week, so I hadn't seen it. He pulls it out of the trailer, and there's a rubber chicken zip tied to the front. And I'm like, okay, we can deal with this. And then it got such good feedback. Like everybody was laughing about it and everything like that. So the next weekend when I had the mod sled, which this is also at Lutsen. So same as that last picture with basically the mud hole. I had bought another rubber chicken. So I had two race sleds, both had rubber chickens zip tied to the front of them, and it was great. Still an all-time favorite. I still have those rubber chickens.
That's awesome. I'm so glad I've seen that. I'm surprised they let you race with gizmos like that. You'd be afraid that I guess if it falls off, they just get chewed up when it sleds.
Well,
right?
see,
it's not like a dirt bike or a mountain bike where that might cause someone to crash. But
well, what you can't tell, Gary, is actually, we did a ton of testing with this rubber chicken, and in a wind tunnel, way more aerodynamic than the stock trim. So it actually was a cheater sled with the chicken.
oh, I'm gonna have to try that. Rubber chickens for everyone at the Sportsman's Lodge.
That's where the speed is.
That's awesome. Is it like, did you stiffen the neck on it, or is it just naturally straight like that?
It was just naturally straight like that. Yeah. We just zip tied its legs to the front bumper and just sent it.
Now, was it black or yellow or white zip ties? What's your favorite? Or like, what do you recommend for those that want to strap chickens to their bumpers?
I went with black only because my front bumper was black. However, there was a stark contrast between the yellow legs of the chicken and the black zip tie. So if you're able to get some kind of mix where it matches Skidoo's yellow and the chicken's legs, that would be ideal.
That All Terrain TV says you'll hear the chicken scream if it falls off.
That's how you'd know. That's how you would know.
You might, if you left a squeaker in, it would be hilarious if it fell off, and every time someone went over it.
Yeah, there's some great pictures from that weekend. Just rubber chickens. There was a cover of a local newspaper the weekend before in Michigan where we had a round of. There's a picture of me on the cover with my rubber chicken racing. It was great.
That's wild. That is wild. And there it is without the chicken, or as they say in Quebec, sans chicken.
Yeah. Yeah. Not as quick that weekend without the chicken. That was also Duluth. So that was again, just love being able to race at Duluth. Was always a gnarly track, but always super cool and super nostalgic and sentimental for anybody who likes snowcross racing.
Yeah. Duluth is. And you know what? You typically find out about performance mods like chickens, strap your bumper too late. End of the season, last race, and your career's over, right?
Oh, yeah. You just wonder what could have been,
Yeah, it could have been, Tucker Hibbert interviewing you instead of the other way around.
Exactly. All it took was a rubber chicken. If only we would have known.
I know. There you go.
Yeah.
That's still from Duluth too. That's another good shot.
Yeah. That's that picture was used on my autograph card that year. That's like one of my favorite pictures of all time, just because you can even see like all the roost in my goggles and stuff of just how sticky and wet everything was. So that's one of my all-time favorites for sure.
Yeah. Love it. That's something we even growing up, and I don't know whether maybe we just didn't have access to it or not, that racing was never a thing that was on our radar. I mean, we used to go out for fun rides and race each other like on the trails and stuff, but racing snowcross was never, I mean, I guess when I was younger too, it probably wasn't that organized like it is today, but it was never on the radar to go, man, I wish I raced, or, dirt bikes. Yes, that was a big thing in my area, but the sleds was not, for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag. It definitely depends on where you are coming from. Like myself, when I was growing up, Rock Maple Racing was the local sanctioned snowcross series, and they were pretty big. However, in the pre-internet, pre-social media days, if you didn't hear that the race was local, you never would have made it. You may have never saw it. For most of us, our first exposure, our only exposure for a long time, was basically watching it at Winter X Games on TV. And that's the only place we ever saw it. So, I was fortunate that New England at this time had a good regional series, places to ride, because if you grew up where basically all you could race was CSRA or ISOC, it's tough to jump in the deep end without some regional experience for sure.
Yeah. My friend Jacob Fight that actually raced, he started Polaris. I think he started Skidoo and went to Polaris racing. He said that the clutching was noticeably different between the two sleds. Do you have any comment on that?
When I was racing, it definitely was. Like stock clutching out of the crate was definitely very different. I felt like the Polaris is revved a lot higher before it would engage. So you definitely had to keep an eye on it. Skidoos were always very, at least in their stock trim, was super, super snappy, really instant response in the clutching and things like that. So it's definitely like, it's not a, people might think when you're racing and you change brands, you just jump on it and go. Like, just think of like, jumping between sleds on the trails, so much easier than jumping between sleds on a track. Like, just the rider positioning and the power delivery, it's so different. So it takes a while to figure out a new sled for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I can believe it, because you're thinking, like you said, you use an analogy of on the trail, and there's slight differences there that you notice, but you're amplifying it 100 times when you're trying to compete on it.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a trail ride or is this a race?
No, that's a trail ride. So that was up in Duluth, just riding some power lines with some friends. And that was like the first year that I wasn't racing. So it was super fun to get out there and, just enjoy riding again. You're not pounding laps on a snowcross track, or you're just out there carving and just hitting drifts and stuff like that. So I don't get out like that as much as I'd like to, but that was a super fun weekend for sure.
And have you done much mountain riding or any mountain riding?
I did a little bit as a kid, never like real true long track stuff, but growing up in New England has actual elevation compared to Minnesota. But I've never been out to like Idaho or Wyoming or anything like that to do mountain riding, but maybe someday I'd love to do it. It's on the bucket list for sure.
Yeah, I had a guy stop me today and ask me about it and said, why don't you go out there? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. So
yeah.
Problem is doing it's not the issue, but getting out there and the cost of doing it is, I said to him, you can have quite a bit of fun for $3,000 to $4,000 in Ontario. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. There's a couple guys that I know in like New Hampshire that they basically like that's like their winter hustle, is they will say, hey, I'm bringing a trailer out to Idaho for a week. Who's going? And all these New England guys will pay him $500 to put their sled in his trailer. And they'll fly out there and ride, and then he'll trailer it back, because there's a lot of people trying to ride out west. It's really expensive.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And another friend I was just talking to, he when he got out of trail riding, because the winters haven't been worth crap here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was going out to Revy, once a year. They'd spend a week out there, and that was his snowmobile budget for the year. He got to always ride good snow and have a good time doing it. And then he caught the bug and ended up buying a mountain sled, and now he has to go out a few times a year.
Yeah. So. I believe it.
Yeah. He said it's easy to catch the bug when you go out. He said the first time going out, you're longing for the next time you're there.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah. I always say that even on the sled trail, like if you had a dealership or somebody selling accessories on the trail, you're having that perfect day riding around, you'd pay anything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you would pay anything. It's so worthwhile. Don't let them get home in the pouring rain, and then because they're not going to buy a darn thing.
Oh yeah,
right.
For sure. Sure.
Have you rode in Ontario?
Have not.
Okay. That's a question the point wanted to know. You want to know where in Ontario has you rode?
Yeah, I've never ridden in Ontario. I've heard a lot of good things though. Like, isn't Wawa has some really good riding, I've heard. I'd love to get up there. Like, I rode growing up in Vermont. I rode a lot in Quebec. I rode a lot in the eastern townships and Tedford mines and stuff like that. So I know trails in Canada are really good. I just never I never get to make it up there anymore.
Yeah, your wife and you should come up to lodge sessions in February 16th to 19th. We got a group coming. We got six or seven people from Wisconsin coming now. So it's it's you could probably meet up with them somewhere around Green Bay, and they're going up, way up, and coming around, and yeah.
Oh, really?
They made it was 9 or 10 hours from their, from around wherever he is, Lunenburg or I'm sorry, I'm butchering the town again. I told you I would, but so you should come on up. We got ladies coming up. I think there's 4 or 5 ladies coming this year. So
It'd be a good
Nice.
time.
That'd be a good time for sure.
Yeah. $450 Canadian. Includes breakfast and dinner.
Oh, so that's dirt cheap for me. That's nothing.
That's for
right?
every day. Somebody says, is that per day? I said, no, that's for all the days. That's for all of it.
That's cheap.
So
That's
it's
cheap.
cheap. LaPointe says it's cheap. Yeah. And good meals too. So
Mhm.
is this the cat?
Yeah, that's my trail sled. That's a couple years ago. I was up at my in-laws cabin in northern Minnesota, and I managed to get first tracks on some fresh snowfall. So I was ready to take pictures, primo riding conditions. I'm like, nobody's gonna believe me. So yeah, there's northern Minnesota trails. Again, I grew up in New England, amazing trail systems, but northern Minnesota trails are really good. There's a lot of good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. You need some B2 Stinger LEDs in that sucker, man. And you got to put on your Ski-Doo warm-up suit. That would match that sled perfectly. And the chicken on the front.
Chicken, right? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You'd be laughing. Those look so good, those Arctic cats.
I know. I'm a big fan of the Pro Cross chassis. Like I grew up loving Firecats. I thought I still think the Firecat is the best looking snowmobile ever made, but the Pro Cross chassis is badass. I'm still a big fan.
Yeah. Rob the Oil Guy says it's good riding there for sure. Yeah. The F7s are one of my favorites. He said you got an F8, absolute rockets,
Oh yeah.
It's a good looking shot. I love it.
Yeah, that was like a year later again at my in-laws cabin, and that was super cool because we had like a major polar vortex going through Minnesota at the time. So that day was -30 without Fahrenheit, without the wind chill, but there wasn't it was sunny. So I went out and I rode just because I was like, I got to say that I went out and rode during this. So it was actually really fun. Like it was sunny, it was cold, but the trails were great. We had a ton of snow and stuff like that. So it was fun.
I'm just gonna throw something in the chat there. Yeah, that's cool. Well, that's the thing. When you get days like this, like you're showing here in the picture, it's just like I said, it's heaven.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, those are the days that you actually remember versus all the days you didn't have any snow. And those are the days that all summer get you all amped up for sure.
Yeah, those are the pictures you look at, not the ones with the dirt going across the path.
Yeah.
What do you got on there? Is that like a 1 3/4 inch paddle on that, like 175?
Yeah, so I bought it used, and the guy had put a mountain track. It's still stock length. It's not extended or anything, but it's definitely a paddle track. It's only a mountain one, and that's like nobody wants to ride behind me because I'm spitting up all kinds of snow, and it's to the point where like I'm just gonna run that track into the ground before I ever replace it, and like because I can't stud it because I don't need it at that length, so I'm just running it like it is. It's fun. Like when you get off trail, it's great. It's phenomenal. But on the trail, it's definitely a little bumpy and nobody wants to ride behind me, but oh well.
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing, your snow flap is up so high that it would really not hold a lot back, if you know what I mean.
No, it does not.
Who are you looking at here?
That was at the Arctic Cat 60th anniversary last year. So any cat fans in the chat will know that's Roger Skyme. So that was pretty cool to be able to meet him. Long time, I don't know what his title was, VP of Engineering or Head of Engineering for Arctic Cat. Largely responsible for slide rail suspension, a lot of kind of pioneering things in the snowmobile world. So really cool to meet him and chat with him for a little while. That was definitely a cool experience.
That is really cool. Like we said, it's those legends that people need to know about and hear their stories, right?
Absolutely. He's on the bucket list of, I got Tucker, I got Blair, but Roger Skyme's on the bucket list for a podcast for sure.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. And this one's hard to see on the stream, but we got an XF cat. That's not your cat you showed. It is the cat from the other picture, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right on. And and then that's a Polaris IQ sitting there, IQR.
Yeah, that's my buddy Dave Olson. We used to work together at CF Moto, but he's a big snowmobile guy too. So he's got a 2012 IQR. So it's got the, you know, the old blue and white, you know, the heritage year for them. So his is trail converted. So we got out and rode a couple times last winter. So always fun riding with Dave.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, the nice classic there too. I love the colors when they do that. And even the new Indies Polaris have that. The blue and the red and the white is just awesome.
Oh yeah, I love heritage graphics for sure.
Yeah, look at this Scorpion, is it?
Yeah, that's my vintage sled. That's my Sting. That was at a vintage show this past year, and then I got my one-piece Scorpion suit that I was wearing as well. I have a hat and everything too, but it was like 35 or 40 degrees Fahrenheit that week, so it was it was hot. I didn't need the hat or anything like that, but
that's freaking awesome. Yeah, what's in that for an engine?
It's 440, 340, can't remember, but yeah, that's like I said earlier, that sled gets more miles than anything else in my garage because I just rip it around the yard. Right? You know, you don't have to worry about super pristine snow conditions or anything like that, and it's probably the most fun thing to ride that I have.
Yeah. Does it have slide suspension or is it bogies?
It's all bogies.
Yeah, because it's in that year when they just were starting to come out with sliders, right?
Yeah.
Or they had some type of hybrid bogey slider combo type thing, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like a hybrid. It's definitely not a comfortable ride by any means, but it's a good time for sure.
Yeah, Pat says it's a kidney buster. You got Just Fly Low's attention. He said scorpions. Pat had that sled, he said. And
really?
LaPointe said he had a Scorpion triple when he was younger. LaPointe says. Nice. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Oh, for sure. Built in Crosby, Minnesota. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, that's one of the cooler aspects about Scorpion is just like any of these OEMs, whether it's Valcor or Roseau or Thief River, it's all these super small towns. And the city of Crosby, Minnesota, again, super small town. I ride my mountain bike up there a lot. Crosby has some of the best mountain bike trails in the state of Minnesota. But anytime I go up there, I like point out to my wife, I'm like, yeah, see that building over there? That's where Scorpion used to be. That's the original engine plant over there. She doesn't care, but I always point it out. So it's super cool.
She married you anyway, right?
Exactly. She committed. She knew what she was getting.
Yeah. The Pat says it's a 440.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty wild. And you know what? Thinking of that was a fast sled. That like when you're talking 440s back then, 440 was the boss. Like that was like the 858 of today. You know what I mean? Like that is a bad arse sled. Love it. The graphics too. You just gotta love the simplicity of it.
That thing too. That has electric start from the factory. That sled does for a model year 77. Super cool. Super cool.
Yeah. That's wild. Is that all original or did you do any restoration on it?
No, it's all original and it looks really good in the photo. It's got some scratches. The skis are a little rusted. Like it's not pristine. It's definitely a rider. It's not a showpiece by any means, but it is all original. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it looks good. I love the low windshield. Greg Keller, he says, hey lads, got to go. Take care all. And Gary, great session. And Spencer, all the best.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, Greg's a great guy. Yeah, there we go. That's all the pictures you sent in there. Here, let me just shrink this down. Thanks a lot, Fast Track, for allowing us to do those fan photos and guest photos for tonight.
Absolutely.
LaPointe's going too. He says, talk next week, Greg. No, he's not going. He just said, talk next week, Greg. Just Fly Low says that Scorpion was ahead of their time. He's a fan, but he's never owned one.
Yeah, they have a big, naturally, a Minnesota brand. They have a big vintage following here in Minnesota. Every year they have like the Scorpion reunion up in Crosby out on the lake. So everybody brings all their vintage Scorpions out, and there's a whole vintage show and everything like that. So they're a fan favorite for sure.
Yeah, I almost thought it was a Rupp at first glance before
Mm-hmm.
I read what it said on the hood there. But the it's very Rupp looking. But of all those old sleds, like those manufacturers, what would you say is one manufacturer you wish still made a snowmobile today?
If it was not Scorpion, because I wish it was Scorpion. I know they made a try in like 2002. They tried to make a comeback, but I think Rupp's got a really cool history. I think when Mercury was in it, they made really, really cool sleds. I really wish, any of the boat manufacturers, whether it was, Glastron or Mercury or any of these guys, I think they all made really cool sleds, and they had the infrastructure to do it. So it's a shame they got out when they did. But yeah, I don't know. I could talk your ear off on old sled brands that I wish were still around, because they're
Cool.
they're so cool. Who's the Alouette? Very much ahead of their time as well. I really wish Alouette would have been able to stay around. They had some really trick race sleds. So yeah, it's
Snowjet put up a fight there too. I mean, they had a lot of good products. Throwing Sparks says Twisters with an exclamation mark, and Just Fly Low said Rupps were awesome. They were awesome. The Rupp Nitro, and Pat says that as well. Johnson and Eberner are basically BRP now. That's 100% right. Ski Rule was another one that was really good too, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Kawasaki. The Kawasaki's of the day were just awesome. The Invaders and Intrudos. Yeah, and Intruders. Yeah. So
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I really enjoy the vintage stuff, and it's dangerous because you're like, well, I could buy a brand new sled for like $5,000, but how many vintage sleds could that $5,000 get me? And then then it gets dangerous.
Yeah, I know. I keep getting people sending me the silver bullets and stuff, and it's like I just have to say no. I have to pretend I haven't seen them, because I know what would happen is I get it and it would end up in my garage and it would never be looked at. It'd be tripped over, and John Deere. That's another one that was a real big. You had one in the background of that picture. There was an old John Deere in that one.
Oh yeah, even
photo.
There's a gentleman that mentioned it earlier too, but Scorpion made a lot of Massey Ferguson's sleds when Massey had sleds as well. So a lot of the ag guys were in it at one point in time too.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So no, I won't keep any more of your time. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your wisdom. It was a blast talking to another podcaster and learning how we do each other differently, and away we go. So any parting words that you have for our fans here tonight?
Aside from check out the Carbide podcast, of course, check out the socials, listen to the show. Aside from that, though, it's just kind of keep the enthusiasm going. I think it's easy to get down in the dumps and be grim anytime we don't get any snow, but the snowmobile community is probably the coolest community in the world. We're all super supportive. We all love what we do, and we anxiously wait to get out in below freezing temperatures every year. Nobody else can say that. So appreciate everybody in the snowmobile space, and absolutely check out the show.
Yeah. Check out Carbide podcast. He's dynamite in interviews. I mean, it's a great way. If you've got a trip to go on, you're driving in the car, you're going to be in the car for half an hour or an hour. If you're in the car for 10 minutes, turn it on, because the next time you plug your phone in, it'll start auto playing. And it's really interesting. He keeps it engaged, and he doesn't waste any time. There's a lot of really good flow with it, and I enjoy every one of them. So look forward to staying a fan of that. And thanks again for your time. Hang out after the credits roll. We'll have a chat, and away we go. But thanks everybody in the chat for all the great questions and comments tonight, and having a blast. And we'll see you guys next week, 7:00 or sometime around that time, depending on when I press record. I won't make any promises.
Oh man. Awesome.
Thank
you guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.
It's a journey.